Hello friends and greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Advanced Level Test Analyst Certification. We are in Chapter 1 talking about the Test Analyst task in test process, where we are moving on to the next segment, that is 1.2, Involvement in Test Activities. However, this topic has many other subtopics, and today we are picking up 1.2.1, the test analysis. And we would like to understand what activities does test analyst perform when it comes to this phase, that is test analysis. Before we look into the details of this particular topic, we would like to quickly go back to the foundation and recall what do we know about test analysis already. So test analysis is basically considered to be the next phase after test planning in the life cycle, where test analysis is more about analyzing the test basis, where test basis can be any document depending on the level of testing which you are conducting. For example, for system testing, it can be system requirements. For interface testing, it can be the high-level design, and so on and so forth. So your test basis can be anything depending on your organization, the type of product and type of documentation you have in the life cycle. So as a part of test analysis, we start analyzing them. And as a part of analyzing, we certainly may have questions, concerns, clarification, contradictions, doubts, and many other things. And yes, we do call them as static defects, right? As a part of it, we also identify the test conditions, where test conditions are more of like your test scenarios, and certainly look forward to prioritize them as well. So on a major note, as a part of test analysis, these are the activities what we conduct as a part of test analysis. Now let's understand what a test analyst should be responsible for when it comes to the test analysis. Of course, when we talk about test analysis, the TA, test analyst, checks the completeness of the test basis and collects any additional information relevant for testing. This includes not only the documentation, but also any kind of verbal information in, for example, conversation in collaborative user story writing. Changes to the test basis can lead to adjustments to the test scope in coordination with the test management. Reminding you once again that before we kickstart with this particular phase, we are someone who is responsible to make sure that we have the approval for this, we have the basis in a state that we can get started with reviewing it, because certainly you cannot get started with analyzing things unless the document are in the right shape. Because if it is in the very early drafts, the developer, like the business analyst or PO, may not let you start the review. The reason is a PO itself would ask you that, hey, I need more time to set this up before you can start telling me what are my mistakes. So that is where the test analyst should check that are we in this right state to get started? Is the test basis in a very kind of like acceptable shape? And do you have the schedules ready? Do you have the budget allocated for this activity? And many more things. Also to add here, to proceed effectively, the test basis, test analysis, the test TA, that is test analyst, checks the following entry criteria. To proceed effectively with the test analysis, the TA should check for all these things. Of course, the planning has been performed and the test scope, test objective, and test approach are very clear. The test basis containing information such as requirement and user story is well defined, and the product risk already identified have been evaluated and documented if required. So certainly when it comes to these things, it is very important to have certain specific entry criteria. And that's what I was just telling you about, the schedule, allocation of the budget, and the document being stable enough to get started. Because I might be raising concerns and there would be a lot of other things which might be happening. And with that, the adjustments would be more. So say for example, you started reviewing a requirement and after a week, the PO comes back and says you that we have refined the requirements, then you may have to put your effort again and again. So it is very important to understand the test basis is well defined for us to get started, and there's nothing pending from the business analyst or PO. Now, of course, in Agile, you can expect there are some fluctuations because we do welcome changes, but in traditional model, this is not something what we entertain. So according to SDLC again, we must be able to define our entry criteria more effectively, because once you get started, we don't look forward to rework, specifically speaking. We don't expect that, but certainly things can go wrong here and there, and we should be ready for that as well. Also to add here, The next part is basically referring to all of the things what we conduct as a part of the test analysis. So the test analyst should evaluate the test basis to identify any defects it may contain and assess its testability, thus providing early feedback to the product owner. This may include modeling the system behavior according to the test technique to be applied. Review techniques can also be applied as part of the process. If not directly fixed, defects regarding the test basis must be documented. Moreover, a TA determines the test oracle needed. Now, there are a few things to understand here. Number one, we are talking about analyzing the document itself, and TA is someone who is responsible for that. It's not that TA will define who will do it. The TA will go through the document and identify any anomalies related to it. Parallelly, they will also be making sure that all the information is up to the mark. And when it comes to the techniques, they may have different techniques. If you remember from the foundation, we did discuss about the perspective-based, the role-based, ad hoc, scenario and dry runs, and checklist-based techniques to be used. So the team can use any kind of techniques to make your review process, which is analysis, a more effective one. Also to add here, the test analyst defines and prioritizes the test conditions for each test item in scope. The test condition addresses the test and must be traceable to the element of the test basis. The scope and focus of the test condition take the product risk into consideration as well. In incremental or iterative development models, this includes determining the scope of regression testing based on an impact analysis. Now, at this point, we do understand that we are talking about identifying the test conditions, and of course, the test conditions will later be transferred into the test cases. Then certainly the test conditions would take everything into account like risk factor. If you have risk identified for those test conditions, we would be specifically designing certain specific scenarios to be covered and would be prioritized according to the risk identified, right? And we may have different proportionate amount of testing to be conducted to especially mitigate the risk. The next thing what we have here is, of course, when it comes to agile software development, the test condition can be expressed as acceptance criteria that reflects the risk of the user story. So parallelly, they have just told you when it comes to the traditional models, or when you talk about incremental or iterative, the determining the scope of regression testing is based on the impact analysis, and same way for the agile software development, it is in form of acceptance criteria. The test analyst can proceed in stages, starting with high-level conditions such as functionality of screen X. Next, the TA defines a more detailed test condition such as screen X rejects account number that are one digit too short, and this approach supports sufficient coverage and enables an early start to the test design. Example, these are stories that still need to be refined. So in simple word, all we are trying to say here is that it's not necessary that a test condition can be defined in all detail at the first attempt. Sometimes we just draft high-level test conditions and then look forward to detail them step by step. So you can have a high-level test condition defined first, then sit down and explain them or detail them with more information. Parallelly, at this point, you can even estimate that whether this story or this particular requirement is small enough for a team to handle, because particularly in Agile, it matters if your story is very much refined, very much small to be handled in a sprint. If in case it is big enough, then we look forward to refine it further into simplified stories. So specifically to Agile, we would look forward to see if the story size is big and look forward to take care of that as well. On the other hand, the test analyst involves the stakeholders in reviewing the test conditions to ensure the test basis is clearly understood and that the testing is aligned with the test object. That means at any point of time, the most important thing for a test analyst is that whatever they are reviewing, it is up to the mark and it is all aligned to that of the test objective. Because at the end of the day, the goal of the entire life cycle is to meet the desired objective of the testing life cycle. Whatever you do should be well aligned. Also to understand that not necessarily all the scenarios, all the test conditions should be detailed itself. Sometimes the test conditions would be enough at a high level itself. So we may have to make a decision that what type of test condition should be detailed and what type of test condition should remain at high level. And that also depends on what is the quality of the requirement. If your requirements are brief, we prefer writing detailed test conditions. If requirements are detailed, we don't duplicate our effort. We look forward to create test conditions in high level so that we have the information in the requirement or a test basis. So there are many such factors which would determine at this point of time that how your effort on the test analysis would be conducted. Well, that's all from this particular tutorial team. Should you have anything else, feel free to comment below. I'm always there to address your queries and answer them well. Till then, keep learning, keep exploring, keep understanding the context. Thanks for watching the video team and happy learning.